Chapter 2, Retrieval. It had been nearly 3 days since the great revival of Konoha. Since the day Naruto found out that he was the last Rinnegan user. This came as a shock to him and caused him to reflect upon his life and what he really knew about himself. To be honest, he hasn't been acting as himself ever since he came back to the Leaf Village. Sure, he enjoyed the celebration after his return to Konoha, but the celebration seemed hollow. Should they really be having a victory party from the death of his cousin? Most people, who were either hammering walls or cementing floors, stopped immediately what they were doing to greet the savior of the village. As he walked through town, the village acknowledged cheerfully to the Uzumaki, either giving him a pat on the shoulder or telling him simple words of encouragement. A lot of times, there will even be little kids that would encircle him and ask him to play. Sometimes he would agree, but most recently he began to decline them, saying that he was too busy at the moment. He really wasn't busy at the time. He was just in no mood to join the children in their time to fool around. Ichiraku wouldn't be built for another day or two, so he scuffed his feet all the way to his newly built apartment that was in place of the original. The entire village contributed to his apartment by making it slightly bigger than the original. There was an additional room and an expanded kitchen. Even the bathroom saw an increase in size as it nearly doubled in width, leaving plenty of legroom to walk around. He unlocked the door and slowly trudged inside. The scent of fresh paint and newly cut wood filled his nostrils as he walked through his recently acquired home. He looked to his left and right and saw the brand new furniture and food that loaded his house. The new food piled to the ceiling with ribbons, cans, condiments and many different types of homemade food. All of this food would take him a whole week and a half to eat even a fraction of it. Honestly, he started feeling overwhelmed by the amount of attention. Something you wouldn't expect from the supposed #1 hyperactive ninja everyone claimed him to be. He could also understand why the people were so giving. The people were indebted to him and had to repay him somehow for saving their lives. So with nothing else to do, he sat down and took a rest on his new sofa. He placed his palm underneath his chin and stared out of the wide window that overlooked the street. People were still busily working on other buildings. Seeing the people doing this made him think of an anthill. Even though the anthill gets destroyed, the ants always come out and rebuild, as if nothing ever happened. Then his attention fell on the origami flowers. He placed them in a vase and put it on the windowsill the day before as a reminder of the alliance he and Conan now share with the Leaf and Rain. Alliance, huh? He asked, looking at the blue flowers. He twiddled them between his index and middle fingers, staring at them blankly. A Megakure, Rain Village, give me what I seek. Tobi Madara asked the half-beaten girl. You will gain nothing but death by fighting me. Conan looked at him, clenching her arm, trying to staunch the pain. Her body tingled in agony with each breath she took. The chakra reserves in her body depleted her energy to move too vigorously, as it was a chore to even keep on her feet while she stood there encompassed with paper. Tobi Madara came for Nagato's body to simply steal the Rinnegan and obtain the secrets and uses of the ability, but was welcomed with a deathly encounter with the blue-haired ex-Sakatsuki. I will never let you take him. Her fury began to overweigh her safety, but she didn't care. As long as she kept her friend away from the hands of the grabber, she would risk her life to make sure nothing was disturbed. Fool. Do you know who I am? He bellowed. I don't care who you are. I will die before I let you take him. A fire burned in her eyes as she said that. Her will was flaming fiercely. The orange masked man looked at her for a few seconds and then smirked under his mask. So be it. He formed a few hand signs and released an unavoidable fireball jutsu. It went so fast that Conan couldn't get out of the way, even if she wanted to. The flames surrounded her body and burned her skin, causing her to scream in excruciating pain. Her final resistance was overrun as she fell limply to the ground. Tobi Madara looked at the girl and then placed his eyes on Nagato with delight. He released his space-time jutsu and sucked in Nagato's body to another dimension by his Sharingan. Just when he was about to leave, a quick figure made an attempt to attack Tobi by ramming through the man with a spiraling sphere of chakra. The masked man went intangible as the figure went straight through him, causing the Rasengan to explode on the ground, forming a crater with dust and debris taking the air. Tobi looked in the direction the person resided and saw a figure standing on the opposite end of the room. Conan staggered her head to look up and saw an orange blur appear in front of her. Her facial features softened slightly once she realized who it was. Naruto, she asked quickly as the boy guarded her. Sorry it took me so long, Conan. The blonde nin told her, unwavered. He was steadily leering at Tobi Madara, making sure the Uchiha didn't make any early starts. The orange-masked Akatsuki stared at the boy. He felt something different about him, as if his power increased twofold. This feeling, Madara thought, still receiving glares from the Konoha nin. This boy, this power, how did he get so much stronger in such a short amount of time? He looked at the boy again, and this time his eyes lingered onto Naruto's. What? Madara thought out loud. What is this? Their eyes interlocked each other's gaze as Toby found himself staring into the boy's eyes. The Rinnegan. Madara then, for the first time in a while, felt a little fear for his safety. The orange-masked man knew he was no match for Naruto in his current state as Toby did not have the Rinnegan yet. He needed a viable excuse to make his leave, because if the Akatsuki made one false move, the show was over. He looked to Naruto and calmly spoke. It is not our time to fight, boy. Toby answered, taking baby steps away from the Konoha nin. He already accomplished his objective, so there was no need to fight the blonde. Then with a wispy sound, he disappeared by using his space-time jutsu. Naruto clenched his fists, but let it go as he thought he would never be able to catch Madara now, or he didn't want to get into a place where Madara had the advantage and could easily take out the blonde nin. The Rinnegan faded from his eyes as he turned his attention to Konan. She had fallen unconscious from the chakra consumption and burn marks scattered all over her body. Her cloak was torn in many places, and her hair was slightly singed on the ends. Blood fell from her mouth and dirt marks littered her body as well. A melancholy emotion overtook his features. When he looked at her, the sight of a nearly lifeless person laying on her deathbed, it made his stomach cringe. No one should have to suffer like this. Don't worry, Konan, I'll get you somewhere safe. He hefted her bridal style, and found her to be a little lighter than he thought, but shook that distraction as he dashed for his life. Konan POV, Konan felt weightless as she laid there, letting her consciousness roam freely. She felt as if she had a fever, and couldn't get up, because she was too weak. Her fingertips felt cold against her face as she basked in the cool sensation it gave her. Then to her left, a shadowy figure came over, and laid a cool rag on her forehead. She calmed even more, and let out a relaxing sigh as the rag permeated the icy feeling through her forehead. She looked over to her right a little, and saw a spiky-haired shadow. The silhouette looked over her with a solemn face, like he was hoping the girl would wake. The figure seemed like he knew her, but a roaming conscience made it seem like she knew him as well. Konan tried to get a better view of the boy by turning her head more in his direction. Just then, her senses suddenly fell sharp as she remembered who he was. She began to slightly tear up as she called his name. Yuhiko, she shouted, tearing out of the bed. Ignoring the dropped rag, she wrapped her arms around the figure, who accepted without hesitation by embracing the girl. She sat there for a moment, continuing her hug and silently sobbing. A minute or so passed as the figure started talking. He seemed hesitant, but needing to say something. Konan-sen? The shadow asked. I'm glad you're happy that I saved your life, but do you have to hug so tightly? Her thought processes terminated as she slowly drew her head up from the figure's shoulder. She knew whose voice that was all too well, as in her arms sat a confused and flushed Naruto. She recalled what happened, and not a split second later, she jerked away, as a slight blush filled her cheeks from the already somewhat feverish face. I'm sorry, I thought, never mind. Her lips pursed as her side fell on the bed. Naruto looked at her, and then looked at his arms. That feeling he felt from Konan when he held her was something he always wanted to feel. He had also wished to know what it would feel like to be loved like Konan seemed to have showed to him. For the moment, she seemed to be in a state of longing for the boy, which left him feeling a little sad about the sudden jerk away from the girl. If only he could wrap his arms around her again. Wait a minute. What am I thinking? Pull yourself together, Naruto, he said, shaking his head. He then pinched and pulled his two cheeks apart to try and erase the memory and thoughts that began to plague his mind. You don't like Konan-sen. You can't. She's like way older than you. Just remember, you still have Sakura-chan to worry about. Yeah, that's right. Naruto-sen? Konan asked quietly. Naruto glanced back at her, repressing any memories that floundered in his mind. Where am I? She returned in the same tone as before. Oh, well, we're in Konoha Hospital. He replied cheekily. Konoha? She exclaimed. But how? Well, he started while scratching his whisker marks. It's a long story. Flashback, Sanada sat in her recovery bed in the Konoha Hospital. After fighting pain, she seemed to have fallen into a coma from the long and painful fight that fell in the village. Her thoughts were a little hazy about what actually happened, so if anyone asked her about what took place, she wouldn't give him or her a clear answer. When she awoke in her hospital bed, Shizune and many others filled in the details on what occurred previously. To say she was surprised that Naruto defeated pain was an understatement. She was thrilled. It seemed that Naruto was filling Jiraiya's shoes, not only by becoming a sage, but also in his personality as well. Depending on how long you are around a person, you tend to become more like them. In Naruto's case, he was almost a spitting image of Jiraiya's persona when the sage was younger, minus the perverted side. But she didn't think on it for too long as the goddamn had a major headache that throbbed in her frontal lobes. It was a headache that made her want to smash her face with a hammer to get rid of the sensation. To see the nine-tailed Jinchuriki burst through the door only made matters worse. "Hey, Granny Tsunade. I need your help," he screamed as he roamed to her bed. "Naruto? What's the meaning of this, barging into my room like a madman?" The goddamn asked, a little irritated. The headache made her more irate than she would have been normally, but Naruto merely shrugged off the attitude by answering the reason why he was there. "Well, you see, I have this problem." He fidgeted. "Well, I have this friend who is seriously injured, and I need to get them to a room to be healed as soon as possible." The Hokage looked at him like he was slightly idiotic. Usually people ask her for more king-like favors, as in doing a mission or asking to retrieve something of major significance, not something this mediocre. "Why are you asking me? If someone is injured, then take them to the medical nin. You don't have to ask my permission for something like that," she replied, bothered by the seemingly stupid scenario. That's the problem. If I tried to bring this person in, the medical nin might reject her treatment." Tsunade shot a questionable look to the boy. She was sort of intrigued by who Naruto had in his mind. It also made her a little nervous, because the medical nin usually heal anyone except enemies of the nation. "Who do you actually have, Naruto?" Her voice dropped lividness and had a more serious tone. She went straight to the point, keeping Naruto from beating around the bush. "Well, if I tell you, you have to heal her, promise?" the blonde nin asked, almost pleading. "It doesn't work that way, Naruto. Now tell me who it is." Tsunade snapped, causing the Jinchuriki to jump. Naruto cast his head downward and then reluctantly strolled over to Tsunade, making sure that no one except her could hear. Specifically keeping wandering Anbu ears from eavesdropping, he started to whisper. "Konan from the Akatsuki." "What?" she yelled. That echoed through the whole place. Anbu quickly filled the area, trying to figure out what was going on. "What's going on, Lady Hokage? Is there an intruder?" "No, you idiots, leave this room at once. This is a matter between me and Naruto here," Tsunade interjected. The Anbu felt a tad disappointed, but left as quickly as they came, making sure not to enrage the Hokage. She kneaded her forehead, letting out a sigh as she did so. This was making her head hurt more than necessary. Naruto was always good at giving her a hard time, and it seemed like he was doing it again. This time she was interested why he wanted her rehabilitated though, so she started a barrage of questions. "Why do you want her healed, Naruto? Does she have good information?" she asked, a little confused. "It's not every day that someone wants an enemy restored to their original status." Naruto shook his head furiously. "No. She's a friend now. She's not even with the Akatsuki anymore." Tsunade lowered her gaze. She felt bad for Naruto as he was still a teenager who didn't fully know the rules. Look, just because she left the Akatsuki, it doesn't mean that all of her actions toward the Leaf Village are forgiven. Naruto frowned at that statement. "I know. It's just that Nagato told me to take care of her. I didn't know any other way than to bring her to the place that is the safest to me." "Konoha," he told her softly. "Wait a minute." The Hokage interrupted. "Nagato told you to take care of her?" Naruto looked at her again and replied quickly. "Yeah, he trusted me with that request, and I have to live up to it. So can you do it?" He was getting riled up from his words just thinking about it. The more he sat here, the closer Konan was to death, and he had to idly wait by. She could be dead right now, and he wouldn't even know it. Tsunade was unaware of the anger and continued to ask more questions. "Well, why would he want you to protect her? He knew you were the enemy." Naruto then clenched his fists. "Because Nagato and I came to an understanding with each other. He trusts me. Can you heal her?" He also gritted his teeth from the dragging on this conversation did. "But that still doesn't make any sense, that he would trust you." You were that Tsunade was cut off as Naruto finally had it. "Because he's my cousin. He trusts me," he finally screamed, causing a great panic from Tsunade. The Hokage's eyes widened intensely as she gained a view of Naruto. He was staring heatedly at her now, but that wasn't the reason why she was wide-eyed. She looked into the Jinchuriki's eyes and saw the 2 violet circles on each iris. She gained a full view of the Rinnegan Naruto now possessed. Her speech became hoarse as she felt a spell wash over her, but she automatically regained her composure, feeling the need to say something. "The Rinnegan?" she choked out. The goddamn was at a loss. She just received information that she never knew, and now it seemed that Naruto now obtained the Rinnegan as well. "Yes," Naruto started. "His last gift to me was the Rinnegan. He gave it to me right before he died and entrusted me with the gift to protect his last best friend and find true peace." His gaze faltered as he found himself looking at the floor. "And that's what I'm going to do. I don't care if people hate me for doing this, because if they were in my shoes they would do the same thing." So, are you going to help me or not? Sanada was speechless. Things were jumbled in her head and she couldn't think clearly. Maybe it was the headache that caused this mishap, or maybe it was all of this new information that she never knew in the first place. It's not like anyone could give her a plausible answer. She tried to find something to say to the blonde-haired Jinchuriki, only to open her mouth, not say a word. It stayed like that for a few more seconds before Naruto turned his head to the door. Fine. If you won't help, I will find someone who will. He said his final words and went for the door. Sanada felt she had to say something, so she shouted his name. Naruto. What? He retorted lividly, turning his head to her direction. Well, I can't do it because I am still in the hospital, but I think I can get someone else to help you. What made her change her mind was never really clear, but Naruto seemed to have gotten through to her in some way. Sanada didn't even know what words were coming from her own mouth. It almost made her dizzy by the event that was taking place, as seeing Naruto this way seemed totally unlike him. He was usually happy and carefree, a little arrogant in some way too, but never hot-headed. The last time she saw him this way seemed to be when he was trying to bring her back to Konoha. Naruto had to fight Orochimaru along the way. He was mad that day too, but it looked like he only gets short-tempered when he is protecting someone. That's one of his better qualities. She thought deeply, but then automatically continued her response to Naruto. Enbu, report. She yelled, summoning the cloaked characters from the front door to the hospital room. Yes, Lady Hokage. The Enbu guards replied in unison. Bring in Haruno Sakura. Tell her to drop everything immediately and come to my room. It is an emergency. She answered forcefully. Yes, Lady Hokage. They replied again in unison. They both instantly disappeared by Shunshin, leaving Naruto and Sanada alone again. You're helping me? Naruto turned back to the lady, who gave him a pitiful look of some sort. Yes. I don't know why, but I trust your decision, Naruto. She felt complacent with that answer as she scanned the room. Don't worry, I will have a room secluded specifically for her in this infirmary, so no one harms her. Sanada responded shortly after. The look on her face changed as her eyes lingered to the ceiling with an annoyed gesture. It's not going to be easy explaining this one. When he heard the Godame's robust statement, it made him feel like a weight had been lifted off of his shoulders. Thank you, Sanada-sama. The Hokage blinked a couple of times when those words spoke from Naruto's mouth. She had never been spoken to so formally by him before. It was almost unnerving to hear the maturity from the blonde nin. Yeah, I want a better explanation of everything that took place in your fight with Nagato, so don't forget. She finalized before Sakura and a few Anbu appeared. Yes, milady? Sakura asked, completely oblivious to Naruto's appearance. The Anbu quickly disappeared afterward from a signal the Hokage passed to them. Sakura, I want you to accompany Naruto and do whatever he asks of you. No questions asked. Tsunade started. But, Lady Tsunade. Sakura burst before she received a raising hand from the Hokage. I don't want to hear it. The Sennin interjected. This is something that has to be handled with utmost importance. Whatever you were doing previously has to be done later. This is a matter between life and death. Tsunade told the girl, unwavered. Sakura looked over to Naruto, who seemed like he wanted to run in whatever direction possible to do what Tsunade was asking. He had an ache in his eyes that wasn't really apparent unless you knew him for a long time. Sakura has known him for the last 4 years of her life, so it was not like things he felt would just slip by her. Concern washed over her face as she felt worried for her friend. Yes, milady. Sakura finally replied. Naruto couldn't hold it in anymore. He sprinted out of the door and ran to the desired location at breakneck speeds. Wait, Naruto, Sakura shouted, only to get no response from the blonde nin. Naruto was in his own little world. He couldn't hear her say anything, since the only thing he was worried about at the moment was laying on the Konoha hospital rooftop. It was somewhere inconspicuous, so no one would dare touch the person or even bother to look. It was getting harder for Sakura to keep up because Naruto was still running and didn't want to stop or showed any signs to. She tried calling him several more times, but the boy simply ignored her. Once they reached the roof, Naruto took a sharp left and veered into a corner of the building, dodging around vents and air conditioning units. He finally stopped and kneeled down next to a larger vent that had nothing around it. Sakura was confused, but only for a moment, as Naruto dispelled a genjutsu to reveal a beaten and tattered Konan lying next to the vent. The ex-Akatsuki was barely breathing and looked as if she were clinging onto life by a single thread. Naruto, is this? Sakura started, but stopped once she saw the Jinchuriki's face. He had a look of contempt to the girl as she lay there helpless. It was as if he was thinking hard about something. Then, without changing his gaze on the blue-haired woman, he asked Sakura a question. Can you heal her? Each word seemed to cut through the air like a razor. He was dead serious about this. He really wanted an enemy of the nation healed. He didn't even really know this person too well, but he would heal her with no hesitation? She looked at him like he was doing something stupid, and received no glares from him as his eyes were still fixated on the Rain Nin. Naruto, you can't be serious. She is the enemy. Why would you? She abruptly stopped as she saw a tear fall from the boy's cheek. Because, I promised a friend. The boy replied hoarsely. Please Sakura, can you please heal her? His gaze did not leave the blue-haired girl's face. Sakura looked at her friend, and then looked at the Rain Nin again as she contemplated for a second or two, not really knowing what was going on in the boy's head. Alright, Naruto, but we're going to have to remove her Akatsuki cloak and any other identifiable items, if we want to do this without any problems. She answered to the blonde nin. Naruto lightly nodded his head as he watched Sakura. Konan no longer had the light blue origami flower on her head, which may have fallen off previously from her encounter with Tobi, so Sakura went for her Akatsuki cloak instead. She pulled off the Rain Nin's cloak to reveal attire unseen. She pulled a red and black cloak to reveal a dark blue zip-up robe that began zipping right above the navel and flared out around her waist. The robe also had no sleeves and left her back bare, allowing easy mobility. His eyes followed Sakura's movements as she continued unclothing the other woman. The missing cloak also revealed skin-tight pants that matched the robe in color, with a wrapped pouch below her hip. Of course the clothes she wore were torn and dirtied, but they were ignored as Sakura went up to remove all of Konan's piercings, starting with her lip. Once she was through with that, the lifeless girl offered no resistance as Sakura finally removed her belly button piercings as well, leaving open holes on her bruised but fair skin. Now, Sakura started, I will only restore her enough to keep her alive for now. The rest of the healing will have to be done in the hospital. He made a silent agreement as Sakura then gently placed her hands on Konan's body, taking the proper steps any medical ninja would be required to do in extreme conditions. Naruto watched as a chakra with a greenish glow began quivering around the medic nin's hands. Her eyelids fell as she examined the Rain Nin's damage. She has a couple of ruptured organs with 4 broken ribs, and one of those ribs has lodged itself into her heart. Sakura announced sadly. If I pull it out now, she will bleed internally. So, what do we do? Will she live? Naruto quietly asked in a tone not usually heard by the pink-haired girl. Well, I can heal her ruptured organs and treat her burns, but we need a medic team to do the rest. Even with all of the things we know now about healing, it is kind of hard to say. She finalized. After taking a breath she continued. All right, here goes nothing. Then with that, she began to heal the ex-Akatsuki. Naruto fell silent as he resounded what Sakura told him. Konan was way more abysmal than he thought originally. The Rain Nin he was told to protect could actually die, and there wouldn't be anything he could do about it, but she couldn't die now. If he learned anything about his fight with Nagato, then he would know that, no matter what happens, always have hope. That was what Naruto believed to begin with, so what made him change his mind now? Nothing. Nothing at all. His attitude altered slowly as memories flooded his head of the struggles he went through as a kid. All of the trials and tribulations he faced kept beating him down and wanting him to stay that way, but Naruto's determination made him rise against every factor that was laid upon him. Sakura stole a glance of his face change as he stood up. She could see the look in his eye. After that revelation of what he originally stood for, his face changed from one of sadness to one of serious fortitude. She'll live, I just know it. He responded out loud. Of course, it wasn't really known whether or not she would live, but the boy didn't lose optimism. He was highly confident in his answer as he stared at the blue-haired girl. Sakura looked at her good friend, then glanced back down at the lowly Rain Nin. Naruto, what do you see in her? She thought apprehensively as she continued her treatment. Konan's face slowly improved from its previous painful expression to a softer, calmer fashion. The burn marks also faded gradually as Sakura continued her mystical palm technique, now keeping her focus solely on the ex-Akatsuki. A few moments later, the pink-haired medic nin finished her treatment. I've done all I can for now. She started while lifting herself from the roof. The rib will have to be done in the hospital, because it takes more than one person for a job like that, okay? He mutely looked at her, and then turned his observation back to Konan. A slight smile grew on his features, because of the noticeable improvements that were shown on the character's body. She now looked somewhat happier from all of the restoration that took place. Then, without hesitation, he picked up the blue-haired ninja gingerly the same way as before and started back into the hospital. Naruto? Sakura asked with a reached hand, but was once again denied recognition from the blonde-haired boy. Her eyes wandered on the blonde ninja for a few moments before she heaved a sigh and followed suit. Later, the pitter-patter of feet echoed off the hospital walls as the duo wandered aimlessly for a room to place Konan into. It kind of angered them that they did not have an escort because they didn't know what room they were supposed to go to, that is, until a couple of Anbu appeared in front of them by Shunshin. This way. One of the black-cloaked figures replied sternly. Naruto and Sakura looked and nodded at each other in silent unison, then trailed behind the two Black Ops members. They all reached a room at the end of another hall to the right and were welcomed with an operating table and several other medic nin, quietly waiting for their patient. It seemed as though the Hokage had kept her end of the bargain, so Naruto felt a little more appreciation toward the Sannin. There were also two other Anbu inside the emergency room, probably there to see that the recovery makes a success without any tampering or secret assassination attempts. Naruto slowly walked into the operating room and placed the Rain Nin's limp body carefully on the table. Not even a moment later, a few medic nin began to operate on the ex-Sakatsuki. Sakura then quickly filled them in on what she did and what was wrong with the woman before one of the other medical nin walked over to both Naruto and Sakura and calmly shooed them out. "Don't worry, we'll take it from here," she replied softly to both of the young leaf nin, closing the door behind their exit. End flashback, I see. Conan said quietly. They had just finished a hospital lunch as the blonde Jinchuriki slurped up whatever he had left of his soup after he finished his story. She looked down and noticed the bandages wrapped around her figure. She was almost mummified from the percentage that covered up most of her body. Most of these bandages seemed to be covering her recently burned areas as well, even though she was healed earlier, maybe because the skin is fresh and far more sensitive than her skin was before. Her eyes fell on Naruto, who gave her a foxy grin in return. It seemed Naruto went out of his way to stay true to his promise that he made to Nagato. Even though she was sort of an enemy to him still, he tried his best to revive her and live up to his older cousin's wishes. Maybe I can trust him, Conan thought in her mind as she reflected upon previous occurrences. He seemed to be way more trustworthy than she thought originally. I don't understand him at all. He even revived an enemy of the nation at his village's expense. It doesn't make any sense, but maybe it would be a good idea to get to know this boy as well.
End of chapter 2.